Today, we're showcasing a company that's native to Colorado called Lightning Systems. They've been making medium and heavy duty vehicles more efficient for the last 12 years. Lightning is at the forefront of fleet electrification, converting the most popular commercial vehicles and their high-tech electric drivetrains. From Ford Transit vans to transit bus repowers and everything in between, Lightning covers a broad range of vehicles for all kinds of needs. And with that, we're going to take you on a virtual tour of the Lightning Systems manufacturing facilities.
Hi everybody, my name is Jeff Deary and I'm the production manager here at Lightning Systems in beautiful Loveland, Colorado, and I'm excited to take you on a tour today. So let's head on inside. So welcome to the lobby here at Lightning Systems. Given the current situation with COVID-19, we are still open and we are practicing social distancing. We certainly have masks for all of our operators on the floor, and we have plenty of hand sanitizer, and we're certainly observing washing our hands as often as possible. One of the things I can speak to from Lightning Systems is that we're all very grateful to still be able to remain open in support of hospitals around the country and other essential businesses, so that we take a great pride in making sure that our services are still available and our customers get their orders. So let's head over to the manufacturing floor and take a closer look at what's going on. So we're here in our battery storage inventory area, and we have two distinct types of batteries here at Lightning Systems. These are ready to go into vehicles in our conversion space, which I'll be able to show you in just a few minutes. So this is our wire department area. We design and manufacture all of our wired harnesses in-house. This particular harness is going to be an accessory bank harness for one of our E450 platforms. It's in the middle of the pulling stage as it is right now, and after this it's going to go over to pinning and plugging, which we'll have shown to you in just a second. So behind me we have two operators that are pinning and plugging E450 space frame harness. The harnesses have hundreds of different connections, and so we take great pride in making sure that all of our pins and all of our plugs are 100% accurate, and we go through a rigorous testing procedure to make sure that we have no flaws. So we're looking at an E450 accessory bank and an E450 drivetrain. You can see some of the harnesses that we've built over in the wiring department have already been installed. And this power pack is going to be pre-commissioned very soon so that we can validate all the components that are assembled onto the weldments, and all of the harnesses are talking to each other, and that everything is working flawlessly. Once this is confirmed, we'll take this power pack and we will install it into an E450 platform. This is our controlled inventory. We have over 10,000 different parts within our controlled inventory that we pull just on time, only when we need to assemble them into our assembly area. So this is our conversion floor. This is the space where we actually take a vehicle and turn it into a Lightning Systems electric vehicle. We've got some in process right now, E450s and Transits. Let's go take a closer look at the E450 and see how that's coming along. So behind me is an E450 that we've already decontented. And what that means is we've removed the engine, the gas tank, the drive shaft, and the exhaust, and some other ancillary components as well. So this vehicle is ready for that assembly to be inserted into it, from which we'll look at thermal management, we'll route all of our high voltage and low voltage wires, make connections, and then finally make some AC component connections to finish it off. So this E450 is a little bit farther along in the process. So you can see that the accessory bank has been inserted into the engine bay. We've got our low voltage harnesses all connected up. We've got our high voltage harnesses mostly connected up. And we've started to begin to the AC connections as well. We'll lift this vehicle here in a minute, and then we can take a look at some of the batteries and the drivetrain and how that integrates with the system. So we've been told it's safe to go underneath the vehicle, so come on down and I'll show you what's happening underneath. Underneath you can see we have 2 battery packs in this E450. They're mounted on battery framework made by our welders that is then assembled straight to the stock frame. This is the drivetrain which attached to the drive shaft. Thanks everybody for coming along on a tour with us at Lightning Systems here in beautiful Loveland, Colorado. I hope you've got a good insight as to the action and the work that we're all doing here, and we're certainly supportive of all the views, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be enjoying that with us. So thanks a lot. Have a great one.
Hi, I'm back, and it hasn't been 6 months. It's only been 6 minutes. Please note the poll on your screen. Our next speaker is Chris Brown, the executive editor of Fleet Forward, Business Fleet, and Auto Rental News. He also produces the International Car Rental Show and the Fleet Forward Conference. Today, he'll be interviewing Lightning Systems CEO, Tim Reeser.
You teed me up pretty well. Hey, there we go. See if we can get my video started there. Yeah, if you don't already know about the Fleet Forward Conference, it convenes in November in San Jose. And Fleet Forward is exactly that. It's fleets embracing the future. This year, we're going to have a big focus on electrification, and we hope you all can make it out to San Jose in November. That's November 9th through 11th. Now, I'd like to introduce Tim Reeser. Tim is the CEO and co-founder of Lightning Systems. You guys got a pretty good look about what Lightning System does based there in Loveland, Colorado. Tim has a BS in mechanical engineering from Colorado State University and has been involved with alternative transportation technology since 1990 when he helped design the first dedicated CNG truck for General Motors. Welcome, Tim. Let's get this conversation started.
Thanks, Chris. Happy to be here. Thanks everyone for the time. Looks like there's 85, 87 participants now. It's growing. So excited to talk to everybody and have you all join us today.
Tim, let's just get started more about Lightning Systems. We got a good look at how you guys produce and convert vehicles, but talk about how did you start the company? When did you start? What are you all about?
Certainly, Chris, we actually started a long time before there was even useful batteries back when we'll call it the dark ages, but October of 2008, right during the recession, middle of the recession, started out actually our original premise was to build a 100 mile per gallon car for the X Prize. That quickly evolved into what at that time was our hydraulic hybrid technology for commercial vehicles. And we really got started heavy with commercial vehicles in 2009 and 2010. So we've been very active in the commercial vehicle market since then, originally with hydraulic hybrids. That led us to build very deep regenerative braking technology within the company, really start to understand commercial last mile delivery with customers like US Postal Service and UPS. And then as we grew our knowledge and as batteries improved over that period of time, by 2017, we decided to really work on zero emission technology exclusively. And since that time, we've been building zero emission technology solutions, both fuel cell and battery electric, exclusively since about 2018 until now.
Great. Let's just recap the electric vehicle market in general. I mean, 2019 was a pretty good year, a little bit down below 2018, but really what we're talking about is the passenger vehicle market. And it really feels like we're at square one or square two of the commercial vehicle market. Maybe you can talk about the commercial market as it relates to electrification.
Certainly. So I think there's a few things, and I know from looking at the audience list, there's quite a few of you who know the commercial vehicle market. So I'll work to not be pedantic, but I think it's important to note a few very distinct differences between the commercial vehicle market and the passenger vehicle market. One of them is when you look at the primary commercial vehicle market, it's not a one size fits all. You think about, for example, think about Class 6 trucks and the fact that some of them are tow trucks, some of them are refrigeration trucks, some of them are delivery trucks, and everything in between worldwide. And especially even when you look at the US, there's no one size fits all. So as opposed to a passenger vehicle, it's reasonably easy to build a one size fits all for everyone, where a Tesla Model 3 might work for millions of people. Certainly commercial trucks just aren't that way. And so it does become more difficult to change powertrains or think about electrifying commercial vehicles because of the bespoke nature, the custom nature of each of them, and the complexity. When you think about where are you going to put your batteries, if you're going to have a tuck under lift, does that change if you have a rail lift? Does that change if you have refrigeration units? Or if we stop and think about food trucks, where are you going to put your batteries if you have cold water or hot water or gray water storage under that food truck, or propane? So all these things are different in commercial vehicles, and that has created a more lengthy process for making commercial vehicles work. And I think the other aspect has been they're just fundamentally different about things like charging. In reality, it's easier, but that's just now beginning to really be understood, meaning most commercial vehicles can return to depot, which makes charging them easier in many cases than some passenger vehicles. Many commercial vehicles have a fixed route, which again makes it easier to predict how they're going to do. But certainly when you think about heavy duty, these vehicles are driven hard. And I think that's the other aspect that's very different when we see, and I think anybody in the commercial vehicle knows it. If you go look at a delivery van that's been driven for 2 years, and you go look at a car that's been driven for 2 years, most of the time there's a very different look between the two, because that commercial vehicle's been driven hard, sometimes 7 days a week, sometimes 2 or 3 shifts by multiple drivers. It's carrying a lot of weight. It's hitting a lot of speed bumps and a lot of potholes. So I think those are differences that are important to note between commercial vehicles and passenger vehicles. But now we believe commercial vehicles are about to see their day, although passenger vehicles have certainly seen a big scale up in the last couple of years. We believe that scale up is on the precipice and about to happen now for commercial vehicles.
Great. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about a commercial vehicle, which ones are sort of first adopters. But I wanted to kind of touch base on, it feels like we've been through, for those in the fleet industry, I mean, 8, 9, 10 years ago, it was kind of vehicle electrification 1.0. What's different this time about the market?
I think that's a very, very good question, Chris, because a lot of people have scar tissue from the Smith Electric days and others that happened, and certainly both on the manufacturing side. When you think about all the grave markers from Boulder Electric and Smith Electric and on the list goes, we look back and say, I think it's a very important question. Are we just going to repeat history, or are we truly in a better spot today? And I think there's 2 or 3 key things that are different and better today. One of them is clearly batteries. Back in the Smith Electric days, batteries were well over $1,000 a kilowatt hour. Today, in practical nature, is something I talk a lot about, even though you'll see studies saying $200 a kilowatt hour. In the commercial vehicle space, where volumes aren't that high, certainly, most people are seeing between $300 and $500 a kilowatt hour, but that's still half or less than half of where it was 5 years ago. And then the second thing that's changed is the supply chain is dramatically more improved, and some of that is certainly credit to the passenger vehicle market. So the passenger vehicle market has spurred the the many standards and many new parts and components in the supply chain. So for example, the CCS common charging standard that exists, we're using that. Anybody I think who's really focused on doing it right is using that kind of standard that didn't really exist 10 years ago. And so to now have standards in the supply chain that we can all climb onto and really grab onto, and to have components that are beginning to scale up from both scale up in terms of availability and also in terms of price. When we started working on electrification even 3 years ago, we would often get quoted a 1 year, 18-month lead time for certain products, for high voltage DC fast chargers, for example. And today we make our own, we've solved that problem, and many of these other supply chain constraints have been solved either directly through vertical integration by us or companies like us, or by the supply chain maturing. So we are very confident we're very much into a commercial vehicle electrification 2.0 that truly is sustainable and will take off and won't be just another trend.
Great. Yeah, totally got it. And you brought back some fond memories, quote unquote. So you kind of touched on a little bit about the applications for commercial vehicles and electrification. Where do you think we're going to see penetration first, and what types of fleet applications?
So I think this is one where our audience is pretty sure, and this has certainly happened nicely, but obviously last mile. But I separate last mile into two categories: last mile passenger and last mile freight. Both of those are low-hanging fruit for two reasons. One of them is they typically have fixed drive cycles. They typically aren't driving hundreds of miles a day. So being able to cater a specific modular battery solution to fit those particular drive cycles, to be able to monitor them well, to be able to train the drivers. Usually it's one driver at a time, or one driver a day, very, very focused on that fixed route. So we certainly see a lot of opportunity in freight and in last mile freight, but also obviously in last mile passengers. So when we think about shuttle buses at airports, or we think about shuttle buses for nursing homes, or passenger shuttles in California, like what Calvans does, where they transport the agricultural workers to the fields, or even when we think about campus shuttles at various both large campuses and large corporate campuses and education campuses, all of those opportunities are ripe. We can make charging happen very efficiently and very effectively, arguably even more efficiently than passenger vehicle space, and we can build in, we can make the products very specific and really focused on making it work well for those people because of the fixed route nature.
Sure. You know, actually, I just wanted to ask you about duty cycle and range. Is there kind of a sweet spot for daily range when it comes to commercial electric vehicles in terms of total miles?
Yes, Chris, and this is one area that the industry is really just starting to discover as more vehicles get on the road and more companies do applications. So we've got a wide variety of customers today running our vehicles. And one of the things you discover quickly is that one size doesn't fit all. So some of our customers that are doing package delivery have very light packages. We think about packages with a lot of air in them, and they can fit really a lot of packages. They tend to wait out, or they tend to cube out before they wait out. In those cases, we can pack the battery as full of batteries, or we can pack the vehicle as full of batteries as we can and get a lot of range. But then we've got quite a few other customers who deliver things like soft drinks or alcohol, or for the food and beverage market in general, that tends to wait out. And so they're very weight sensitive. And so what we're finding in the commercial vehicle space is, because batteries do weigh something, and as you get more range, it takes more batteries, that either for those customers, if they want more range, we either have to move into a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle to get them that kind of range, or they have to step up a class of vehicles. So they might go from a class 6 to a class 7 so that we can put more batteries from a weight standpoint and not run out of GVW to put that battery in. and give them the range they want. So we see it's certainly taking a lot more planning and a lot more thinking. And it's, again, not a one size fits all. What we do for certain freight delivery doesn't work for food and beverage, certainly. And so it's important to think about that. And it's also important to understand that in some cases, the battery electric vehicles, we're using the very, very latest super high energy density batteries. But even with that, the vehicle still weighs more than it did as a diesel vehicle or a gasoline vehicle. So we do have weight constraints around GVWR, both in passenger and in freight. And those are important considerations to have. Even on the passenger side, we've got people who have stepped up from an E450 to an F550 offering from us because, again, they can fit more passengers and not be weight constrained. They can also fit more batteries and have more range if needed.
Great. Let's get into some very specific aspects for fleets. And charging's one thing on the passenger vehicle side. I mean, you can get one off of Amazon for your house for $600, but it's a whole different ballgame when it comes to commercial fleets. What does the market for charging look like? How's that developing?
Chris, it's a really, really good question. And as we saw from the poll earlier, it's the number 2 or number 3 concern that fleets have as they look at electrifying. So it's very key. Lightning feels it's so key. We've started our own energy division, and what we're doing is providing chargers. In some cases, we've got some customers who want to buy them, some customers who just want to rent them, other customers want to lease them. We look at and realize many customers want a full turnkey solution, so we've developed a business model around that, and we feel it's important. But one of the reasons we could and can develop that business model is because the ecosystem has really grown around it. So the availability of chargers from companies like BTC, Delta, ChargePoint, all really good products and certainly becoming better and better products and better serviceable products. Certainly the utility companies have all stepped up in terms of providing subsidies and support for the installation of these chargers. And certainly there's been, we've developed, and so many others, a lot of software around the integration and the management of those chargers to avoid demand charges and allow companies to scale as they need to go. And then finally, there's a lot of look at what do you do as you scale, and you might scale past what the utility company can provide you right away. So we'll be announcing in the next couple of weeks our mobile battery vehicle charger to allow people to do DC fast charge in a mobile way. Also working on a variety of ways where you look up and say, where do I need DC fast charge and where do I not? And it's important to note, again, as you said, Chris, on vehicles, pretty easy to charge your vehicle overnight, a passenger car overnight on a level 2 charger for $600, or even the one that came with your car. When you get to a class 6 truck, for example, where this vehicle has, or even when we think about our transit bus or our larger coach bus offerings, the transit bus typically has 320 kilowatt hours or more. Coach bus might have 640 kilowatt hours or more. You're obviously not going to charge that in a month of Sundays, literally, with a level 2 charger. So you have to look at DC fast charge in these larger applications. So we often hear people say, well, you only need DC fast charge if you're trying to charge fast. Well, that's not true in commercial vehicles. In commercial vehicles, you might have to have DC fast charge just to get it charged overnight, given the amount of batteries these vehicles have. So it's an important transition of thinking for the charging companies and the people providing charging infrastructure to realize the DC fast charge for big commercial vehicles is not a nicety. It's a necessity in many cases just to get something charged, in a nighttime dwell.
Sure. Great. Thanks for that comprehensive answer here. Listen, folks, we're certainly going to get to that main question on total cost of ownership. We're leading up to it, but there's, some stuff that kind of factors into that. And maybe we can touch briefly on maintenance of commercial electric vehicles.
And again, Chris, I think this is a very important question, and it didn't show up big on the questionnaire, but I think from our standpoint, every time we're talking to customers, it's one of the key points. Again, it's different. Commercial vehicles typically require a lot more maintenance. When you think about class 6, 7, or 8 vehicles, just a brake job is sometimes a 3-day ordeal. 3 days of downtime, and a very significant amount of work goes into that and money goes into that. So it's very important to think about maintenance, not only from a cost, but also from an availability. Not everybody on the corner can actually replace the brakes or even take the tires off a big coach. It's a very significant undertaking, requires a big garage, requires specific tools, very, very careful and requires specific training from the mechanic standpoint. So we are partnered with companies like Ryder, with Ford as a quality vehicle modifier, and other major fleets, their own mechanics. So we actually work at training some of our fleet mechanics directly. Many of them want to do their own maintenance. So it's very much a part of our work, a part of what we do, and an important part of the ecosystem for everyone to have readily available service nationwide. And I think it's also one of the key aspects of us choosing the common platforms we've chosen, like a Ford Transit, because we've chosen common platforms across our entire line. If you have a Ford Transit and you need a mirror, you can get a mirror over. You don't have to buy one from China. You don't have to get one from Czechoslovakia like the Smith Electrics used to have. You can have one overnight. You could probably even go to Amazon and get a mirror for your Ford Transit. All the way up through our entire line with what we're doing on repowers of coaches. Again, most of those customers have spare parts in their garage that fit. We also are Buy America, so we carry a lot of parts directly right here in the US. We can ship them same day. So from a service, from a part availability, these vehicles are highly serviceable. They're familiar to mechanics. It works. And we've set up a very nice ecosystem to support them long term.
Well, okay, let's tackle cost, because we've got initial cost and we've got total cost of ownership, and of course, we know in fleet that really the key factor is TCO. But really, when we talk about electric vehicles, specifically electric commercial vehicles, it's kind of a mindset shift when we look at TCO, because there's so much more that goes into it. I mean, can we elongate the life of the vehicle in the fleet? There's funding issues, which kind of vary by state. And, regulatory things even come in that factor into TCO. So I'll throw that out broadly to you and we can follow up from there.
Yes, I think as we can see from the poll, it's the most important question on everybody's mind, or as we say, the gorilla in the room. And I think a year ago when we talked to fleets, and when CalStart talked to fleets and said, what's keeping you from electrifying? Most of them said, the vehicles we need aren't available. Clearly that's not true today. We offer, a plethora of vehicles from class 3 to class 8 in very common platforms and standard platforms that fleets use. So the vehicles are available now in an electrified, both hydrogen fuel cell and battery electric option from us and from others. So we don't think it's an availability problem. Now the real key is how do they afford them? How does the cost come down? And as you point out, Chris, that's a multifaceted question. Let's start with the front end cost. And I think it's important to note today, all commercial vehicles are in low volume, whether we're talking about the prototypes that some of the OEMs have built, or whether we're talking about some of the scale up products we're doing. None of us are building 500,000 a year of these products. No one around the world is building 500,000 commercial vehicles like some of the passenger vehicles are. So what it means is costs are naturally higher. Higher volumes in the automotive space mean you're paying more for components, dramatically more for components. And it also means you have dramatically higher labor costs because you aren't able to automate all that labor. So with the whole industry now having what looks to customers like a ridiculously high price, I think one of the key aspects is we all need to get volumes up. And that obviously is happening, thankfully, and we're starting to see larger orders from us and from other vendors, and that's starting to drive battery prices for commercial vehicles down. It's starting to drive other components down. Many of us are also hitting the curve on our own vertical integration. So we're building quite a few of our own components now out of necessity, and that's driving our price down. And then finally, as our volumes come up, our labor costs are dropping dramatically because we're moving from a hand-built environment to a semi-production, semi-automated environment, some robotics, some automation. You can see in our factory now, there's quite a bit of automation now that didn't exist before. It was very hand-built. So as we climb up that scale, the prices are coming down, and they will come down quickly. But I think it's important to notice that, and to note, we have a lot of people say, well, I'll just wait on the sideline until it's cheap. And obviously there's a chicken and an egg there. If nobody buys anything, it's not going to get cheaper. So we don't hit the volume unless people buy something. So we do need early adopters who step out and say, yeah, it's expensive, but we're going to buy. But the other thing we're seeing right now is the early adopters very much are going to have a huge lead on everybody else as regulations take hold. So as we start to see cities doing zero emission zone requirements, and freight companies, especially around freight, starting to be forced by regulation to have a zero emission vehicle in those zones. Those companies that have stepped out and bought the more expensive products that are today and yesterday, and put in chargers and put in a service and training network, and really spent the time to understand and make the investment and the R&D investment in electric vehicles and understanding it, those people are going to have a huge jump in being able to meet the regulatory requirements that are coming this year and next year, and be able to put vehicles out. Those customers that have chosen to wait till it got cheap and wait till it was as cheap as diesel, which, by the way, that's one of my pet peeves when people say it will be as cheap as my diesel vehicle. I step out and say, okay, when do you think a battery is going to be as cheap as an aluminum fuel tank? And the answer is never. And so, yes, are electric vehicles going to get cheaper? Are they moving down the line? Yes. But I think it's a misnomer, and it's poor planning by organizations to pretend they're going to wait until it's that cheap before they make the investment, because they're going to get left behind. They're going to be in a situation where they can't get vehicles, and when they do get vehicles, they don't have the knowledge, the research, the development, the infrastructure, the charging in place to move forward. And so it's really one of my pet messages to the group today is, yes, it's not cheap today, but it is getting cheaper. We see a very dramatic drop in costs on our side over the next 2 years. But in the meantime, use those government subsidies. We'll help you find them. Some of them exist. And take the opportunity to really make the investment, understand charging, get your service networks and maintenance put together, and build the relationships you need, so that when you have to have these because regulation happens, you're in a position to be able to scale up.
Great. I want to just verbally cue Steve or Bonnie to, if one of you guys could get that second poll question up there, we can get some responses there and get cracking. I think while that question is up on the screen, Tim, let me just ask you, we talk about the market 1.0 and the market 2.0, and certainly one of the big differences is, heck, there's some big OEMs getting into play here. When we've got Freightliner retooling a whole factory in Portland specifically for EVs, class 8s and class 7s, that's pretty exciting. We just, we're at the Work Truck Show and saw the introduction of the Ford E-Transit, which could be a game changer. How do you feel about OEMs in this space as a conversion company?
So we see the OEMs as good for the organization, good for the market. So overall, and this might surprise people, but let me kind of state where the differences are. We're very confident. Obviously, we're very close. We have a great relationship with Ford as a QVM. We have a great relationship with General Motors and Isuzu and others, and certainly keep our tap on an hourly basis on the market. And to be quite frank, we don't see any of them as directly competing with us, and I'll explain why. If we look at Ford, for example, they're very focused when you think about their business model, and this is true with all of the large OEMs. Their business model is to do very high volume products, make very large investments, and I think everybody's read the press releases that these people are doing. Ford, I think, said they're spending a couple $2 billion with a B to build their Ford Transit. We can all do the math. They can't spend a couple $2 billion on a Ford Transit and do something low volume. So they're focused where there is high volume, and that is in the Class 1 Ford Transit and the Class 2 Ford Transit. So the smaller, more ubiquitous vehicles where they sell 100,000 a year of those vehicles worldwide, they can make that kind of $1 billion investment. I think it's important to note they are not electrifying the passenger vehicle in Class 1, 2, or above. But it's also important to note they are not doing the Class 3 Ford Transit at all, which is where Lightning starts our work. So we don't overlap. And again, when you think about the Class 3 Ford Transit, Ford sells about less than 4,000 a year of that product. So it doesn't make sense for them to spend $1 billion a year on electrifying a Class 3 Transit. They're going to leave that for folks like us. Same thing with the E450 and the F550 and the 650 and 750 lines. they don't build enough of those to make the huge investment that's required to electrify it. In the same way, they don't build enough of them to go build their own shuttle bus version of those product or their own tow truck version of that product. They've, for the last 100 years, have left that for the upfitter community to do those lower volume, highly customized products. So Lightning really specializes in those lower volume, highly customized products, a Class 3 Ford Transit passenger, a Class 3 Ford Transit cutaway that you might see with a potato chip delivery, for example. Ford's not doing that. It's not on their list. They're not planning to do it. And when you think about the OEM's ability to customize it, they aren't, meaning they are building a one-size-fits-all. They have to, and that's what they're doing in that Class 1 and 2 space. Now, certainly, again, we've got a few of them, as you mentioned. Daimler with Freightliner is planning to build certainly something in the Class 6. But again, it's if you really look at what they have to do with the investment they're making, it's a one-size-fits-all. If somebody wants to make that a tow truck, it's going to be a very difficult undertaking for any of you who've seen the product, because the batteries take all the space where the tow truck would have to put all its components. Same thing with a food truck. Same thing with a multi-refrigerator truck like 7-Eleven might run, where you've got 2 refrigerated compartments that, again, you can't do in a one-size-fits-all. And those have always been something that the upfitter community and folks like Lightning who do conversions are really well suited for that kind of semi-custom work. So we're quite confident the market remains for us. But I think the other point is many of those OEMs, all of them have been more than a year, if not 2 to 3 years late coming to market. I don't believe you'll see a mass-produced Class 4, 5, or 6 for many of the big guys, meaning mass-produced, meaning more than a few prototypes for 3 to 5 years. And if you look at their schedules, that's where they're at. Even the Ford Transit, Ford said end of next year. To be quite frank, I don't personally believe they will hit that, looking at where they're at with their supply chain and their prototypes. I would guess they're 2 to 3 years behind that based on what we see. So again, if you want to build expertise today and build charging and understand service and ecosystem, somebody like Lightning's well ahead. We've already built it. We're scaling up. We're going to be competitive with them in price. We're going to be more than competitive with them on product. And we're going to be the guys who can do the bespoke activity, the semi-custom activity that this medium market truck space needs. So from our perspective, what is helpful is the big OEMs help drive the cost of components down. So we're happy to see them in the market. They're helping us. And we see ourselves partnering closely with those folks as we move forward. The example I give, and a lot of people don't think about it, Cummins has been in business a long time building powertrains, even though major OEMs build their own powertrains too. And that's just one 100-year-old example of how this medium duty custom truck space needs its own solutions that aren't always provided by mass produced solutions.
Great, Tim. Thanks. Hey, let's see those poll results from that second poll question. Largest motivation for fleet electrification, sustainability, environmental goals. Hey, I think if there's one thing that comes off of this COVID-19, folks in New Delhi right now are looking up at the sky and they are seeing a clear sky. The results of what can be done in so short of a time is finally palpable to us. And I wonder, if this is kind of what's driving some of this stuff. Kind of surprisingly, lower cost of ownership is, kind of B on the list, or second, regulatory requirements, distant third. But that's really kind of interesting that sustainability and environmental goals is right up there. Any thoughts on that, Tim?
I'm pleased to see it, and we believe that is confirmed by the work our marketing group has done, as well as we ask our customers what's important to them. And obviously, it's something we spend a lot of time on, because as a group who's doing things like Buy America, we're thinking a lot about where the energy comes from, thinking a lot about where the electricity comes from. You'll see white papers on our website about where the energy comes from and how green or sustainable or carbon neutral that might make somebody. And many of our customers are asking those tougher questions. They're diving deeper into not just, is this a zero emission tailpipe vehicle, but where is the energy coming from? As we work with some of the customers on hydrogen fuel cell, same thing. They're asking, where is that hydrogen coming from? Is that green hydrogen? So we see a more sophisticated customer base asking the right questions. And it's something we spend a lot of time on and have personal interest in, and I have a personal interest in it, and want to help customers really understand it. even to the point where we've got, for example, one of our customers in Boulder, Colorado, running a transit bus repower. They took a 2004 transit bus that was going to go to the landfill, and we repowered it electric. So they saved the landfill work there on a sustainability play. But then we also worked with them as they put in their own solar and natural gas generation that powers the chargers at night. So they're able to now, through a smart grid or a microgrid with smart grid connected to it, power the vehicle with about 80% solar power every day. So there really are great sustainability solutions that happen when you electrify, because of the optionality you have on where that electric energy comes from and how it's produced. And that's now a key part of our business and something we want to help our customers with and be there for.
Great. A question for the team. We do have poll questions. I've got a lot of questions to get to here, but I don't know if we wanted to flash that final poll question now or save it. You know, happy to do it whenever, but just wanted to make sure we got to that. Yeah, okay. If we can flash that poll question, and then we'll get Gabriella to do that. Well, while we're getting that poll question up, you know, maybe we can even get to some of the stuff that was thrown out. I see there. Sure. Okay. Here's the poll question: fleet electrification goals over the next 5 years. We're looking at percentages there. So we'll give a minute to allow folks to take that in and answer that. I'll toss an easy one out to you, Tim, while that's up there. Do you guys do ride and drives? How do you handle that?
Yes, I think it's important to note in our business, demonstrations are a key aspect of it. And I think the world today is even going beyond ride and drive. So we have a couple customers who've said, hey, Tim, we want 3 or 4 months because we really want to understand how our load variation and weather variation impacts the vehicle. So we have set up short-term rental agreements for our demonstration vehicles for those customers. We've then provided daily analytics and telematics data, gone over that with them to really understand deeply how to extrapolate across their whole fleet and how this is going to play. How much battery capacity do they need? I think, again, this is an important, when you think about battery capacity. I was meeting with one transit customer recently, and they said, well, we're just going to do a one-size-fits-all. We just want to spec all the transit vehicles for 250 miles, and then we don't have to worry about it. And I said, well, in the transit bus space, each mile of battery capacity, and this is true whether you're talking about Proterra, BYD, or us, or New Flyer, each mile of battery capacity is $500 to $1,000. So even if you use the lower number and assume it's $500 per mile, that means your extra 100 miles cost you $50,000. Do you really want to be that imprecise with your planning? And the answer, of course, is no. Nobody wants to spend willy-nilly $50,000 more on a vehicle than they need to. So the electrification and broadly, whether it's hydrogen fuel cell or electrification, requires more planning and thought. And so the need to have ride and drives, the need to have shorter term rentals, we think is an important part of the scale up process. So we've got some customers who just purchased 15 or 20 vehicles and they're running a test. Some of them are renting some vehicles. Some of them are doing a quick ride and drive and then scaling up. So, but either way, we think it's important for customers to move down that road. We've built very specific telematics and analytics to really make sure we're on top of this and making it happen.
Before we tackle some of these questions, let's look at these poll results and how interesting. I mean, I imagine these poll results 5 years ago would be drastically different. There's actually folks, some respondents that want to electrify 90 to 100% of their fleet by 2025. I commend you on that goal. Even the fact that the biggest respondents we're looking to get 25 to 49% of their fleet electrified. What do you think about these results?
I'm excited to see it. I think, and that's what we see from everybody. And I think, but the other thing is, I think regulations are going to force it. So I think a lot of people today are saying, hey, you know, we want to do it as we saw in the earlier poll because it's sustainable and it's the right thing to do. But I think it's important to note for those customers and companies and corporations that aren't there yet, they may not have a choice. We're seeing many of the big cities, city of LA obviously is highly touted, but there's lots of other cities, Boulder, Aspen, Colorado, Austin, Texas, New York City, and others that are very actively proposing a zero emission freight zone. And these are done at the state and local level. They don't require EPA. They don't require a change in president. These can happen this year, and we see some of them actually looking to happen this year. So you can imagine as regulations, and of course London and certain other European cities have already done zero emission zones. As you start to see zero emission zones for freight, folks who deliver freight of any sort, whether we're talking about food, beverage, deliveries, product delivery, whatever that is, if all of a sudden you have to be zero emission to go into LA, it no longer is going to be a TCO or an ROI equation or what does it cost. It's going to be, we have to do it. Just like catalytic converters, just like diesel particulate filters, you have to have them today. You don't have a choice. It's part of a regulatory environment. There's no ROI on a catalytic converter. You just have to do it. And we see that beginning to happen with electrification at a regulatory level. These cities want quieter cities, which is a huge obvious benefit of zero emission vehicles. These cities want less smoke. And we see now because of COVID, there's a much bigger purpose and intent on health, as you mentioned, Chris, health and wellness. And zero emission vehicles are a part of that, and zero emission freight is a big part of that. And so I'm very convinced over the next 18 months, we're going to see tremendous regulatory push, and that will, even the people who aren't thinking about sustainability won't have a choice. It'll be regulated in, and those people who sat on the sideline and thought they could wait till it was cheap are going to be disappointed because they won't have access to vehicles, they won't have chargers in place, they won't have a service or ecosystem to serve those vehicles in place. And so I think it's very important to think about what might happen regulatorily as well.
Great. And we've got literally about 9 minutes left. And I've got 3 questions I want to get to. So I'm going to throw them out there, and we're going to make sure we get to all 3. One very specifically, how many vehicles do you have deployed on the road? I did want to ask you about fuel cells, because it's a very specific part of your business in the market right now. And then a question came up about Ryder, and this is also sort of a supplier partner, vendor partner question, how you work with these different vendors. Heck, I'll throw it out to you. Which one you want to tackle first?
Let's tackle the first one. Repeat it though for me.
Well, apologies for that, Tim. How many vehicles does Lightning System have deployed on the road?
Certainly. So we built and deployed about nearly 40 vehicles last year for across about 15 different customers. Now this year we have orders and are deploying another 260 vehicles or so this year. We're building capacity to do more than that. So as we get into third and fourth quarter, we may exceed the 260 vehicles that we're currently building and will put on the road this year. Our goal next year is about 1,000 vehicles next year. So you can see the ramp up. And obviously those are a function of as we ramp up, the costs are coming down. And so we know the demand is increasing on those. So very fast ramp up from the vehicle side, but it certainly started relatively slow with a smaller number of vehicles. If we include our hydraulic hybrids, we still have about 200 of those running on the road as well. So a lot of commercial vehicle experience, a lot of telematics data and analytics data, but on the battery electric side and fuel cell side, it started really last year and is starting to ramp up quickly. I'll roll right into your second question. We're a huge fan of hydrogen fuel cell, partially because we've got a variety of customers who already run hydrogen fuel cell for their forklift infrastructure. So they already have fuel cell. They need vehicles that run 200 miles on a full load, which is very difficult to do from a gross vehicle weight with a battery product. Much easier to do with hydrogen fuel cell. And what we find is as you cross about 150 miles of necessary range, it gets cheaper and more cost effective to do that with fuel cell than it does batteries. So we see ourselves continuing to offer both battery electric and fuel cell electric vehicles. The base powertrain is the same from us. It's just a question of whether you have more batteries or whether you have fuel cells charging a smaller number of batteries.
Great. We certainly have a lot more questions here, but let me just ask you first about Ryder and your, supplier and vendor partners. How does that relationship work?
We have a variety of supplier and vendor partners nationwide and individuals. So we have conversion partners who do conversions for us. As you saw from the video, we do some of our own conversions, but we have partners like A1 in Fresno, and we have partners like NorCal Vans in California as well, and a variety of other partners. Spartan Automotive, who does Class 6 conversions for us. So we have partners who do conversions for us. We also have partners who do service for us, like Ryder, like various Ford dealers, like XPO in California, and others. So we believe those partnerships are absolutely key in order to make sure our customers have what they need for both service and for install, and from a logistics standpoint, making sure we can get vehicles out quickly. So we're committed to the ecosystem, committed to the channel, and we believe that channel is very important for scale.
Okay, what about your relationship, your partnership question came up with Plug Power and Class 6 trucks?
Yes, so Plug Power is today our hydrogen fuel cell provider for that. So they're providing the hydrogen fuel cell infrastructure on those trucks. We provide the powertrain, they provide the fuel cell. We're also, by the way, doing Ford Transits with them as well. So we'll do more than just Class 6 fuel cell. And we've got some customers like in the food truck business asking us for that as well, for an all-electric food truck. So you'll see more products than just the Class 6 with Plug Power and us. They're a great group. Again, part of what they bring is a huge service network and a lot of customers who already run their fuel cells on forklifts. So it's a nice application fit to just go from those big customers who are already running forklift fuel cells and provide the trucks at that same location with the same fuel cells.
Sure. Let's see if we can squeeze a couple more questions in here. Can you give us the 5-year plan for Lightning System?
Yeah, we see ourselves doing nearly $1 billion in 5 years. I know that seems ridiculous, but we see the commercial vehicle space scaling tremendously fast. Obviously, we know our price is coming down and will come down to meet that. So you have a convergence of the price coming down, the volumes going up, and a tremendous number of vehicles going out, not just to meet the sustainability, but also the regulatory requirements in last mile people delivery and last mile product delivery.
Sure. And you did mention that you guys are EQVM with Ford, right? Just wanted to re-up on that.
Yes, and that's just so everybody knows there's two key aspects of that. And we see a lot of people throw it around and people talk about it. But the most important part of QVM is that the rest of the Ford warranty stays intact. The other important part is Ford Motor Credit will still finance the vehicles with our powertrain on it. So that gives you an idea of the quality, but Ford is in our facility auditing the product regularly. They have very strict guidelines on where we can drill holes, weight and balance of the vehicle, those sort of things. So it's not just about the partnership, it's also about the quality, the in quality of the vehicle. And I think people who've driven it know that our product has a very high quality, very elegantly engineered and integrated product that most of our customers say it's better than stock. Most of our customers, the delivery customers running our trucks today say the fleet drivers say they would much rather drive our truck than the gasoline version of our truck. So I think that speaks to how elegant and deeply integrated the product is.
Sure. Okay, let's see if we can squeeze this in. You were touching on most of it, but you know, with your conversions with high utilization fleets, they drive most of the day. Charging time may be an issue. Essentially, those are what, return to depot and charge at night and good to go in the day. Anything to say on those high utilization fleets?
Yeah, certainly. I think two things. One of them is because we support DC fast charge and AC fast charge, the idea of opportunity charging. So we have a customer in San Diego who runs 220 miles a day. The vehicle's 110 mile a day vehicle. So they are taking advantage of lunchtime and break time to do a DC fast charge top up. It's very effective, it works, and then of course a nighttime fast charge. So they are able to do that through a combination of opportunity charging during the day through DC fast charge as well as charger time at night. They're running 3 shifts a day, so even at the nighttime they don't have a long dwell, but it's very doable with electric vehicles today in DC fast charge.
Great. It looks like we are really just about at the top of our hour. Tim, thanks for all this wonderful information. We can answer more of these questions, I think, offline that came in, and there were a few. Right now, I'm going to turn it back to Steve, and we'll wrap things up.
Thank you, Tim and Chris. Just want to say that we've had a lot of very good questions, and in the interest of time, we haven't been able to answer them all. So we will answer them after the webinar electronically.